How's it going, guys? In today's video, we're going to be talking all about filming better interviews. Even though you might have filmed hundreds of interviews by now in your career, it's very likely that this is maybe the first or second time that your subject has ever even been on a camera the way that they're going to be right now. So it's very normal for them to be nervous or have questions about what they should do during your interview. The way I look at it, it's just as much my job to conduct a good interview and have a conversation with them than it is to produce a visually appealing video. Tip number one is a pretty general but also very important tip, and that is to have your subject rephrase the question in their answer. A question I might ask the subject is, what does a typical day look like for you? Or what does a typical morning look like for you? What's your routine? And if I was just having a conversation with somebody in real life, they would probably answer something like, yeah, I usually get into the office about 7:30, get caught up on emails, set up the studio, so forth. But 99% of the time, you won't hear from the person asking the question. So this kind of an answer won't make sense in the final edit. So having educated your subject this way, you'll hopefully get a response more like, a typical morning for me starts off in the office at about 7:30 a.m. when I get caught up on client emails, so forth. This will sound so much better in the final edit, and it'll make it so much easier when you're transitioning from one subject or one question to the next in the interview. Tip number two, it's totally okay to make suggestions about your subject's wardrobe. It's very likely that they don't know what looks good on camera, but you do. So here's some things to avoid wearing when being on camera. Herringbone, pinstripes, and other small patterns will cause a weird effect where your shirt will appear to be dancing or jumping around on camera, which is not what you want. One other thing to avoid wearing is shiny materials on your shirts. This will reflect all the light that's coming in and it'll bounce around and just won't look good on camera. Lastly, don't wear logos, unless they're your own, of course, to avoid copyright issues. I know that it can be weird or uncomfortable to tell your client what to wear, so my advice would be to explain how I just explained what not to wear, and then maybe suggest that the client bring 2, 3, 4 outfits that you can choose from. Tip number three, get to know your interview subject beforehand. Whether it's possible for you to actually meet them or not, what I suggest doing is while you're setting up your lights, doing your final checks with audio, don't just let them sit there in silence. Talk to them about their lives, get to know them a little bit so that way they're more comfortable with you in front of the camera. Doing this and getting to know them will make the interview seem like more of an extension of a conversation that you started when they got there rather than this separate scary thing that they have to do. Tip number four, tell your subject that they're probably going to make a mistake and that's totally okay. Your subject is going to slip up, mispronounce a word, or maybe just lose their train of thought. It's bound to happen. Before you ask any questions, tell them that if they do make a mistake, just start that thought over. This is one of the main reasons why I always film interviews with at least 2 cameras. It's much easier to cut from one camera to the next camera rather than doing jump cuts or having your only option be cutting the B-roll that you may or may not want to use. If you feel like your subject is getting flustered, it's totally okay to jump in and say, hey, just so you know, you can repeat that one. This isn't like live TV, so we can cut from one camera to the next, and the audience will never even know that you made a mistake. Tip number 5, let your subject sit with a question for a few seconds longer than you might think after they answer. I've found that sometimes the best responses come when your subject gets to sit there and think about what they just said. If you interject immediately after you feel like they answered the question, you might never know if they were trying to expand on a thought or if they were thinking of something else. And most likely, they're not going to speak up and tell you that they want to say more about a certain topic. I know I said 5, but I just thought about this one while I was sitting here, so I'll leave you with this. Ultimately, an interview is a conversation, so make it one. If you're holding your phone with your questions on it, put it down. You want to have your questions in your head, but once you do, engage with the subject. It's okay to take a peek at your questions, but once you do that, make eye contact with them. Let them know that you actually care. Nobody wants to talk to someone who isn't giving them their full attention. To take this one step further, really listen to what your subject is saying and ask follow-up questions. It's part of your job to get the best responses out of your subject. So if you want to dive deeper into something, say that. Say, hey, let's dive deeper into how you felt during that specific moment and see what they say. that's gonna do it for this video. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.